Hey, what's up, everybody? How you doing? You doing all right? That's good. I'm glad. Forget about it. Anyway, listen. So, as some of you may or may not know, I happen to host two podcasts. There is this podcast, which is Nothing's Off the Table, and then the other podcast is Throwing Down with Andy and Ricardo. Unfortunately, I've come to the decision, or fortunately, however you may want to look at it, that we are no longer going to continue on with Throwing Down with Andy and Ricardo. So what we are going to do is kind of merge the two shows together. With that being said, there were some shows, particular guests that we had on with Throwing Down with Andy and Ricardo that were exceptionally well received. And so what we'd like to do is kind of re-release them for your listening pleasure here on Nothing's Off the Table. So this show tonight that you're going to be listening to, our guest is Nate Quarry. So Nate was a UFC fighter, and he kind of, what he does now is he goes around and gives a lot of his time back to the service members. So he'll travel overseas to the different bases, and he's got a group that a bunch of UFC fighters, current and former, that get together, and a gentleman named Kurt Schrout put this whole thing together, and so they tour. Kurt was a prior Marine, Semper Devil. Still trying to get him on the show. But anyway, I don't want to give too much more away. I would like for you to enjoy it. Now, there is a caveat there. Nate is probably one of the first people that I ever interviewed / did a podcast with. So there are a lot of lessons learned with recording equipment, sound, and whatnot. So it wasn't the best sound recording, but the interview itself went great, and we'd like to thank Nate once again. Anyway, enough of my talking right now. What I'd like to do is just kind of invite you to get yourself a drink, maybe a snack, settle in, get a blanket, wherever the case may be, and give a listen to the show.
You're listening to Nothing's Off the Table, the podcast where nothing, well, almost nothing, is too taboo to discuss. On Nothing's Off the Table, we give everyone a say. We may not agree with or even like the topic, but we're happy to give you a voice, listen to your perspective, and maybe offer our own. Nothing's Off the Table is a MadSiss Productions podcast. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and on iTunes.
Our special guest today is none other than the legendary, at least in his mind, maybe in my mind too, Nate Quarry.
Very small circles. I'm well known. I go to Home Depot. I get recognized. Go to Dump, I get recognized. Fancy restaurants, not so much.
Yeah, who can afford that? I sure can't. Hey, brother, listen, I appreciate you coming on the show. And we kind of talked just a couple seconds ago about how my two listeners, my mom and dad, will appreciate it too.
I want them to feel like you're doing well.
I'm glad somebody's looking out for me. But so, dude, you I got the honor, and I truly mean that, of meeting you a couple months back when you came out with your group here to Yokosuka, Japan, to kind of put on a seminar for the troops.
Yeah, that was great. That was my, I think, third time to Japan, second time doing Armed Forces Entertainment tours, and it really is a total blast and an honor. Everybody always says, oh, you're going out to support the troops, that's so wonderful, and I'm sitting here going, let's see, I get to fly around the world, get treated like a rock star, meet these amazing people, and wrestle with them.
Right?
Yeah, I'm just real giving.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, everybody here really, really appreciated it, without a doubt. So that's all anybody could talk about for quite a while. And then,
very cool.
Yeah, and then you bring it up afterwards, and they're like, Nate who? Yeah.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, but, so how did you get started in that?
In the Armed Forces tours?
Yeah.
I've got a buddy, Kurt Schrout, who is with us on that tour. He's the big, bald, ugly guy.
Hey, I resemble that.
And he was in the Marines. And he just thought to himself, he wanted to give back. Obviously, being someone who served himself, he wanted to give back in any way, shape, or form that he could. And so he started reaching out to other fighters. And it's been just such an honor. And Kurt's one of my closest friends, one of my favorite people on the planet. To be able to travel around with him, and I missed the opportunity to serve because of, my dad was in the Navy. He went into the Navy. It was literally the choice of jail or the Navy, and so he chose the Navy and really turned his life around.
Uh-huh.
But before I was born, they entered into a cult, and I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness. And so I was getting hounded by the recruiters, I think my senior year in high school, and all I could say is no, my God does not want me to serve in the military. And now looking back, because being raised a Jehovah's Witness, you're not allowed to do any college education, anything like that. So I went straight into construction, working for another Jehovah's Witness who paid me a ridiculously low wage and didn't really learn too many incredible skills. So I always look back at that and think if there's one thing I really could have changed about those years, it would be joining the military and serving. And it's funny, too. I'm 44 now, and I had the idea, I think it was last year and the year before. Uh-huh. I said to myself, and I was talking with some people, as I always like to talk about with politics and stuff, and I just thought to myself, I'm talking about all this stuff. What if there's something I can do about it besides going on the tours? And so I applied online to join the Coast Guard as a reservist.
No kidding.
Unfortunately, the cutoff date was 38.
Uh-huh.
And everybody that I've talked to, I've said, if you have an in, I would love to be a Coast Guard reservist, and I'll make it worth your while. I'll commit to 5 or 10 years, whatever it needs to be, and I don't want any special considerations. Uh-huh. I'd be more than happy scrubbing dishes or doing whatever it takes just to be a part of something like that, because we live in this country. We have so many incredible advantages that we can take to really put to just making us, and I consider myself the American dream. Being raised how I was, and then looking about and saying, I'm unhappy. What can I do to change that? And as soon as I put my mind towards fighting and going down that pathway, the whole world just kind of opened up to me. And in so many other places in the world, it doesn't matter what your dreams are. What you are born into is who you are, what you're going to be, what you are, and those things never change. So I wanted to give back if I could, and unfortunately, they didn't even respond to my email. So it really makes me regret that after my last fight, because I was 38 when I had my last fight, that would have been the time. But it never even occurred to me something like that. And yeah, I think for me, it would be one of those adventures that I could go take. And I'm a single father. I've got a wonderful girlfriend that I live with, but I need to be here for my daughter. So I thought being a Coast Guard reservist would be perfect.
Absolutely.
Go out for one weekend a month and do my time and really help out the nation. And I don't know, unless somebody just listening decides to pull some strings, if your mom or dad can make some calls for me. But
it's funny you say that, because my dad's retired Coast Guard.
Huh.
But he's been retired for, I've been in for almost 30 years now. So and he retired probably about 9 years before I joined, so it's been a while. So he probably doesn't know anybody anymore. But it's a good dream, though. But listen, man, in all seriousness, what you're doing, you're doing your part. Honestly, you're giving back, and it means I can't tell you how much it means to have you and the fellas you hang with come over and do things like this. And like I said, I've got almost 30 years in, and I'm telling you, it makes a huge difference. I'm not just saying it to blow smoke up your butt. But
well, it really is an incredible honor for us, and I look back on my life and where I was 20 years ago. When I first started training, I saw the UFC on TV when I was 24, and I said, I'm going to go do that. And 11 years later, I was fighting for the world title for the UFC. And I look back on who I was, where I was going. I saw my father die at 62. I had just turned 30. I was working in construction. I was the head installer. I was a shop foreman for a sign shop here in Salem, Oregon. And I was just unhappy. The work was unfilling. I'd reached as far as I could go in that company. had a disagreement with my boss, and I just said, you know what, I'm done. I'm going to take a chance at pursuing my dreams. I had a 2-year-old baby, I had a mortgage, and I had $3,000 in the bank.
Wow.
And I didn't know what I was going to do or how I was going to do it. I just said to myself, let's see, I can live on $1,000 a month. So I got $3,000 in the bank. The worst case scenario is I chase my dream for 3 months. If I fail miserably, when I look back and I'm 60, in my 60s, I'll think, I took my shot. And I would much rather fail greatly than always wonder what if.
Amen. Yeah. No
And
doubt.
I sat down with my little girl. Like I said, she was 2 at the time, and I always wanted her to feel like she's part of the decisions, even at that age. And I said, well, we're not going to be going out to a lot of movies, buying a lot of toys, but you get to see Daddy every single day, and you get to go to practice with me and be with me all the time. I'm no longer going to be going to a job I don't like.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, okay, Daddy. And so we took our shot. And it's funny, I just got one of the federal letters talking about, I think, Social Security, where it shows your yearly income.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back on those years, I had 3 or 4 years where I had 0 federal income.
Jesus.
Because we were living on $10,000 a year, just barely scraping by. And it was that same year when I turned 30 that I got a phone call from my parents saying that my father has been diagnosed with this disease where his bone marrow quit producing red blood cells. So he was essentially suffocating. And your red blood cells are replenished every few months. And if your bone marrow quits producing them, well, then you eventually no longer have the ability to oxygenate your muscles and your brain.
Right.
So I went and I spent the last 3 weeks of his life with them, and prepared for his passing as much as I could with my mother. And I actually had to tell my mother, well, I feel like I've done all that I can here. When I arrived, my dad could still get up and walk around, and I helped get rid of his old work van, which was so junky, I couldn't even sell it. We had to donate it to one of the causes. I went with him to pick up his final paycheck, and he was still working in construction for somebody else. Got his final paycheck, and even driving back to the house, he was passing out. And he couldn't even afford to live in the house that he built with his own 2 hands. He was now renting a smaller house while he had to rent out the home that I grew up in.
Huh.
And I saw everything that he had tried to do through his life, and it just seemed like his passing, all he had left was just debt and regret. And it was just another one of those times where I said, I'm not going to live like that. I will fail greatly on the biggest stage ever trying to make something amazing happen than live safely and go to the job that's unfulfilling. And so I kissed my father goodbye, and that was the last that I saw of him, and I had to fly off to Richmond, Virginia. I made weight on Friday night and got the message that my father had passed. And that Saturday, I took out those weeks and months of frustration and what I'd seen with my father's passing. I took all that out on my opponent, and I snapped his arm in the first round.
Oh, wow. Who was the opponent?
Todd Carney. We were in Excalibur promotion, something like that. It was in Richmond, Virginia. And they had brought me out a year or two beforehand to fight their champion, Nakapon, who was undefeated brown belt in Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai champion, just this total stud of a guy. And they brought me out there to lose to their champion. They didn't want to fly me out from Oregon. Nobody knew who I was.
Right.
They were bringing me out really because Randy Couture, was my coach and training partner. So they were bringing him out for an appearance, and I got to fight while I was out there. This is pretty much how it was. So I even, talking about fighting Nakapon, I asked the promoter, so what's this guy like? Because back then we had no clue. I'd fought most of my early fights. I had no clue who the guy was until I saw him across the ring or the cage.
Right.
So I asked the promoter, well, what's the deal with this Nakapon guy? How does he win his fights? And the promoter looks at me and he says, oh, any way he wants. Knockout. Tap out. He's a tough guy. And I looked at him and I said, well, I'm a pretty tough guy too. Should be a good fight. And at one point in the second round, Nakapon jumped up on me. He was trying to pull me down into his guard, and I didn't go down. And I carried him across the ring like I was carrying a baby, and I sat him down in my corner, and I just beat the hell out of him.
Nice.
And so fighting then against Todd Carney, it was the same thing. How they brought me out to fight their local guy. They didn't want to keep flying me across the country, and Todd Carney was the usual 3 or 4 inches taller than me, had 3 times as many fights as I had. And I just learned about range and moving in and out, and I jumped in and I landed like a 3-punch combo, and I jumped back out. And I saw all of his punches just whiz right by me, and I jumped in again and landed some more and jumped back out. And he'd had enough, and he grabbed me and tried to take me down. And I just remember thinking to myself, you want to go down to the ground? That's fine. I'm not even going to fight you. Let's go down. And so we go down, and I actually head kicked him from my guard because he was standing up above me. Head kicked him a couple times, my only 2 head kicks in my history of MMA. And then he came down into my guard, and I went to up kick him again. He moved his head, and I got him right into a triangle.
Oh,
and
nice.
He faced up really quickly, but I had a hold of his arm, and I just snapped it.
Literally.
And he started tapping immediately, and they said they could hear it pop from across the ring. And I ran around the ring with just the emotions pouring out of me. And this little guy came up to the ring, and he said, oh, nice to see you here fighting. I recognized him as Joe Silva, the matchmaker for the UFC.
Oh, cool.
He happened to live in Richmond, Virginia, and came out to see the fights that night. And he said, all right, I'm going to call you. And so when they were casting for The Ultimate Fighter, he called me and said, we want you to come down and apply for this. And I thought about that many times, how that was such that year was such a difficult year. And I have tattooed on the inside of my left arm, Roman numeral 30, so I never forget when I was 30 years old. All the changes that I went through and all the hardships and the choices that I had to make. Do I stay there in Oregon? Well, my job was done. I'd done everything I could for my father. They moved him into hospice, I think, the next day. And there was really nothing else I could do, but I had given my word that I was going to go fight. And that was just kind of something that to this day has been important to me, that if I say I'm going to do something, I do it. I was actually, after this, the UFC had called me to actually fight on a boxing card. They were going to put on 1 or 2 MMA fights on this boxing card and wanted me to be on it. And I said, geez, yeah, how can I turn that down?
Right.
But the catch was the weekend before, or what was it? I think the boxing card was going to happen in a few weeks, and I had already taken a fight in Idaho. So I said, well, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to fight this guy, and then, a few weeks later, then I'll go fight this guy in whatever boxing card this was. Well, I think I was driving to the airport for the fight in Idaho, and I got a call from Joe Silva that the boxing card had been canceled, but they still wanted me to fight, but they were going to move me up to the UFC the very next weekend.
Well, that's just horrible, wasn't it?
And I said, well, geez, all right, well, let me talk to my coach about this. So I was riding to the airport with Couture, and I said, hey, we're flying to Idaho right now. We're on the way to the airport, so I can go fight in Idaho in this small show for a few $100s. Joe Silva wants me to fight next weekend in the UFC. And we decided, okay, well, I said I'm going to fight in Idaho. I'm going to go fight in Idaho. I'm going to beat this guy quickly. I'm not going to get injured, and then I'm going to go fight in the UFC the next weekend.
That's pretty
And
cool.
that's exactly what I did. I went to Idaho, and I beat the guy in the first round, and they actually announced he's moving up to the UFC next weekend. I land in Vegas the following weekend, and I get the call from Joe Silva. Your opponent is injured. He's backed out.
Oh, man. Of course.
And the funny thing was, I saw him out at the club, I think the very next night, dancing. So he did not want to move up our fight from the boxing card to the UFC and take a beating from me. But it was just another one of those opportunities where I'm just going to go with the flow, and I always tried to be ready. I never was out of fighting shape. For that entire time, that was my job. I'll be at the after-fight party, but you're not going to see me there before.
Sure.
I'm going to do everything I possibly can because, like I said, I started training at 24. I don't have this wrestling pedigree. I didn't box as a teenager. I didn't do any sports. So me going into these fights, well, if I'm fighting a guy who's this phenomenal collegiate wrestler, there's nothing I can do about that. I can't go back in time and wrestle.
Right.
But I can control my conditioning. I can control my mindset. And that's what I always did. I was going to be the most prepared that I possibly could be going into any of these fights.
I'm very sorry that you lost your father, but at least you had the opportunity to be there. There's so many folks that, they don't have that opportunity. So, meant to be, I'm thinking. And it kind of helped you get in that direction of where you need to be as far as a fighter. But speaking of a fighter, I wanted to know, how do you go from being a Jehovah's Witness, because that's got to be just a whole different world in and of itself, to how do you go into getting, being into fighting? How do you get that interest?
Well, as a kid, because I was not allowed to play any sports whatsoever, and I always look at it like this: you take your average kid, their childhood is sports and homework and family time, and that's pretty much their life. Well, for me, from the time I was little, I started doing public church talks from the time I was 7 years old. And we went to church Sunday morning for 2 hours. We could also go out into the door-to-door ministry work Sunday afternoon. And we had family Bible study Monday night. I had school all day Monday. I had homework after that. Tuesday night, we had another meeting that was a 2-hour-long meeting. I had school. I had homework. I had to be prepared for that meeting as well. In my high school years, I was working part-time or 2 jobs during the summer quite often. I did janitorial my junior and senior year in high school. I worked at Dairy Queen fast food my sophomore year. I worked in the fields before I was old enough to work at a real job. Picking strawberries, I could make up to $20 a day if I really hustled, which was pretty good money at the time. So Thursday night, I had another church meeting. Sometimes Friday nights there was church meetings. Saturday, we'd go out in the door-to-door work for another couple hours. So my entire childhood, and the Jehovah's Witnesses control what movies you can watch, what music you can listen to, what books you can read, what friends you can have, what family you can associate with. So I was so controlled. Even I grew up in a congregation of about 100 people. There'd be 2 or 3 kids about my age, and it didn't matter if you liked them or not or had anything in common. If you wanted to have any friends to do anything with, these are the kids you had to hang out with. And me, I'm very picky with my friends. I'm a pain in the ass as well, so I prefer my time alone and being stuck here. As an adult, I find my friends that I really enjoy, and those are the people I want to spend my time with. I don't do so well in situations where you're told, well, these are your friends.
Right.
So I had this rage just building up inside of me. Then add into the fact that it was also an abusive household as well. Whenever I made a mistake, it just wasn't that I was a kid who made a mistake, who screwed up. No, I took my beating, but then even worse on top of that was I was an embarrassment to God himself, because everybody knew that I was a Jehovah's Witness, and now I'm making the Jehovah's Witness, the entire witness community, look bad. So I just buried my head. I said, I'm not going to do anything. And if I got in a fight at school, the beating I took at home was twice as bad as whatever it would have been in school. So I just had this burning rage and desire building up inside of me. And in my early 20s, I was reaching this breaking point where I still believed that the religion was the truth, but I was at the point where I would say to myself, I don't care if it's the truth or not. I would rather die at Armageddon than continue living my life this way. And so I was at this party with some people, and they said, hey, there's these guys fighting in a cage on TV. And I just remember thinking to myself, who would do something like that? That is just insane. I wouldn't even watch boxing. I thought it was too violent. Because striking and violence, I equated all of that to my childhood. That any type of aggression was always backed by emotion. That getting slapped by my mother or something like that. And then I saw Ken Shamrock and Hoist Gracie going at it, and I realized, geez, these are athletes who are skilled. And at the end of the bout, no matter how much rage they may have during it or beforehand, they hug each other. They've shown respect to each other. And when I told my mother that I'd quit my job and I was going to become a full-time fighter, her response was, well, I don't approve of that. That's violence. And all I could think to myself was, no, you slapping me in the face when I'm 8 years old, that's violence.
Yeah.
This is sport. And so for the first time in my life, I chose to do what I wanted to do. And I had horrific nightmares for probably 10 years afterwards because it really is a form of PTSD. And it took me a long time to discover. When my first therapist that I went to, I said, why am I this way? And she said, you have PTSD. And I said, no. I'm not a soldier. I haven't been shot at. And she said, that's just one form of PTSD. You can have that from getting bit by a dog. Yours comes from your childhood. And it really made me understand who I was as a person. And then through this understanding, try to overcome it. And fighting was a way for me to live out my dreams, to discover who I was as a person. Because I remember when I was a little kid, and I could have been 6 or 7 years old. I was on the coast here in Oregon, and the waves started to come in, and I got trapped on one of the jetties. And I was so scared that I sat down in the sand and started crying. Now, keep in mind, I'm 6 or 7 years old.
Right.
And this older boy grabbed me, and he said, wait for the wave to go out. We'll run across. And I thought about that nonstop for the next 15 years. Am I still that little boy when times get tough? Am I going to sit down and cry? Or will I fight till I have nothing left? In my first fight, I won in the first round. I never even got hit. Second fight, I won in the first round. Never even got hit. It was, I think, my 5th or 6th fight when I was really tested. I fought Mike Whitehead for the main event, this small show. We were supposed to fight for 15 minutes straight for the first round and then come back out for a 5-minute overtime. Mike Whitehead was ranked number 3 in the country at the time for Greco-Roman. It was supposed to be a catch weight of around 215. I weighed in under, he weighed in over. The timekeeper and the referee were chosen out of the crowd.
Oh, Jesus.
It was so bad. The promoter, who didn't do any preparation whatsoever. Some people bought some tickets that he knew, some guys that just trained with us, and he said, hey, what are you doing? Well, I'm here to watch the fights. No, I need a ref. Here, put on this shirt. Does this shirt fit you? And yep, it did. So that was the referee. And hey, you guys, what are you doing? I need some judges, and I need a timekeeper. So I'm sitting there. I take this fight, not even knowing a clue who Mike Whitehead is. I knocked out one of Mike Whitehead's training partners a week or 2 before this. Hit him so bad, gave him this massive compression cut on his forehead, gigantic cavern. So all Mike Whitehead knew was that I had a big right hand. So the referee would look at Whitehead across the ring and look at me, and look at Whitehead and say, "Are you ready?" And Mike would say, "Yeah," and he'd run across the ring.
Jeez.
He'd look at me and say, "Are you ready?" And I'd go, "What the?" And Mike would be on me, pick me up, and slam me on the mat.
Holy
We were supposed to fight for 15 minutes for the first round. The timekeeper bumped the clock. We fought for 22 minutes straight.
God.
At several points, Whitehead, I would get a triangle on Whitehead. He'd shove me under the ropes and punch me through the ropes. The referee would break us and say, "Don't do that. All right, come back to the center of the ring. All right, get back down in the triangle." And Mike would go, "No, I'm not doing that." And the referee would yell at him, "Get in the triangle." Mike would be like, "No. What are you going to do about it?" And the referee would look at me and go, "Well, all right, Nate, stand up." I'd be like, "God damn it." So it'd start again. "Whitehead, you ready?" "Yeah." And he'd run across the ring. "Nate, are you ready?" "What the?" And he'd pick me up and slam me down. Finally, like minute 16 or something, my corner finally pulled their heads out of their asses and started yelling at them, "Keep him in his corner. Do not let him run across the ring." And it was a ring, so you have 90-degree corners. It's very hard to sprawl in a boxing ring.
Right.
And so finally, Mike and I meet in the center of the ring, and I sprawled. And of course, he couldn't take me down. I was on Mike's back for 5 minutes straight, punching him in the short ribs. His corner is yelling at him to crawl underneath the ropes so that they'll stand us up again. So he's got his left hand on the corner of the ring, trying to pull himself underneath the ropes, while I'm punching him in the ribs.
This is something like you see in a movie or something, right?
Oh, ridiculous. In a really badly written movie at that.
Right.
So I sit up and I throw a big bomb, hit him, and I grab Mike and I grab the other rope and I pull Mike back into the ring. Well, now Mike, who's had his left hand on the side of the ring the entire time, referee doesn't say anything. I grab the rope to pull Mike back into the ring so he can't escape. The referee starts yelling at me. Let go of the rope, Quarry. And I start yelling to him. I'm doing your job. He's trying to escape. Let me keep fighting. And I just start cussing and yelling at him. I turn back to Mike, hit him again, and we just keep on fighting. Well, the bell rings at minute 22 or something. The referee, I think, looked at one of the other guys and goes, hey, I bumped the clock. I don't know when the time is. And he's like, it must have been 15 minutes by now.
Jesus.
So go back to the ring, go back to the corners. Second round, it's more of the same, just more beatings. At the end of the fight, the promoter goes up to these judges and says, well, who won? And the judges go, we have no idea. We don't know if it was Whitehead, if it was Nate. Well, all the promoter heard was Whitehead's name, because everybody's yelling.
Right.
He goes into the center of the ring and announces Whitehead won. So, I'm pissed. My corner's pissed, but it is what it is.
Damage is done.
I go and I look at my head coach, who was Matt Thornton at the time, head of the Straight Blast Gym, which is now where Conor McGregor's fighting out of, but I think he's out of the Ireland branch or something like that. I look at Matt Thornton, who all he had been doing for the previous I don't know how many years maybe 3 years that I've been training, is he'd just been giving me beatings. Hadn't even been trying to train me. And I looked at him and I just said, I proved right now, you cannot make me any tougher. I will fight through anything. You need to make me a better fighter. And he said, all right, I will. And it was there that I really came to the understanding, no, I'm not that scared little kid on the beach anymore. I'm a grown man who will fight through anything. So, and this story can go on, but, so shortly after that, like literally a week after that, I'm training with Matt Thornton, the head coach, and it's only me and him Friday night at this advanced class or something like that. And I told him, like I said, the week before, teach me to be a better fighter. So I'm wearing these 20-ounce boxing gloves, sparring gloves, which are huge pillows, so you don't hurt your sparring partners. I'm the only one that has gloves like that. Everyone else is wearing 8-ounce, 10-ounce, maybe 12-ounce bag gloves. Very solid things, only designed to protect your hands. Thornton's doing the same. He is 6'7", 6'8".
Good God.
At any time, he's anywhere between 225 and 285. I don't know what he was at the time. I'm staying out at his range, working on slipping and moving and bobbing and weaving. He starts unloading on me. And I throw a big overhand right, and I shove him up against the wall, and I just said, what is your problem? I'm actually going and fighting something you have never done. You've never fought MMA. You're trying to be a gym superstar. What is your problem? And he looks at me and he goes, well, here's the thing. You're no good and you never will be, so I'm just using you as a punching bag.
Wow.
And at the time, it was just heartbreaking. And I remember I had an hour-long drive back home, and I'm just crying my eyes out. I called one of the other coaches, who at the time was my best friend, Robert Follis, and I said, I can't believe he would say this to me. I can't believe he would do that. I'm trying to be a fighter. I'm trying to promote his gym. I'm fighting for him. I'm not even getting paid. I'm an amateur fighter. And Robert said, this is about him. This is about his insecurities. He sees you going out there and fighting, doing stuff that he's not willing to do, and it threatens him. So right then and there, I decided, well, if he thinks I'm no good, I'm never going to train with him again. So a couple weeks go by, and I'm training at the gym, but I'm just training with Robert Follis now. He calls me into his office, and he says, well, regarding with what was said a couple weeks ago, I just kind of wanted to address that. And I'm just sitting there, and at this point, I'm over it. I said, you made your decision. And he goes, well, I do miss you as a training partner. You push me, so you're good for me. I'd like you to come back and train with me.
You're good for me.
About him.
Right.
It's nothing about me and where my career could be.
We call those people whiffums. What's in it for me?
I like it. And he says, well, here's the deal. You've already paid for a lifetime membership, so I can't get anything out of you, so it's really not worth my time to spend any time training you.
What a dick.
And I started laughing, and I went, let me just give you one piece of parting advice. Even if you believe that, don't tell that to your students.
Right.
That is the worst business model you can possibly have. And looking back now, this was before The Ultimate Fighter. This was before I fought for the world title. And I am the most loyal guy around. I would have been wearing his patch on my shorts for my entire career. I would still have a link to his gym on my website if he had treated me with respect, the respect that I earned. So that's kind of that story. But so the years go by. Now I'm training at Team Quest. I've done the Ultimate Fighter, make the UFC, all that stuff. Matt Linland is putting on some fights called Sport Fight. They're in Gresham, Oregon. So it's a small fight community. Mike Whitehead and his crew show up. They've got some guys fighting, and I see them pointing at me and kind of laughing. And I walk over and I was like, "All right, guys, what's so funny? I'm used to people laughing at me. This is nothing new."
Right.
And they said, "Dude, you have no idea." I don't. What's the gag? Remember when you were fighting Mike and you were on his back and you hit him with these, it was like a double axe handle. I hit him with two fists, both sides of the head at the same time. And then I pulled him back into the ring and I started yelling at the referee. And then you turned around and you hit him again and you kept fighting. I said, yeah, I got it on tape. I remember that. He goes, yeah, watch the tape a little closer. We have the tape from our angle in our corner. You knocked him out.
No way.
Didn't realize it. You yelled at the referee, you turned back around and hit him again. He woke up and you kept fighting.
Holy smokes.
And what could I do? I just started laughing.
What?
Now I was in on the joke, so
What?
it was just hilarious. Not just the way things were back then. You didn't know who you were fighting or if a doctor would be there, fighting in a warehouse, fighting in a bar with people slapping the ring right next to you. It was
Even more like a B movie, a B-rated movie.
Yeah.
Holy smokes. So, like I said, my two listeners, those that listen to this podcast are pretty up to speed with the whole MMA thing. So maybe if you don't know, Nate is a Season 1 alum of The Ultimate Fighter. Is that correct?
Yep.
The first one. So I watched. That's where I first heard about you, was watching that show. And watching you guys on that show, I have a judo background, so I started judo when I was a kid. But watching that show really made me. After the season was over, I went out and I started training jiu-jitsu after that.
Nice.
It was awesome. So I don't know. I'm kind of loyal as well. Still think that season was the best season. And again, look, you're not paying me. I'm not blowing smoke up your butt. But yeah, that was the best season in my opinion. But it was pretty awesome.
It was crazy times, man. I remember going to practice at Team Quest, and there was all this talk about at UFC.com. They were just advertising for fighters wanted for some reality show. And we had no idea what it was about. I was being managed at the time by Couture and those guys at Team Quest. And they made no effort whatsoever to reach out to the UFC to even talk about having us on there. It was Joe Silva calling Randy Couture and saying, hey, that guy Nate Quarry who fought in Richmond, Virginia, I want him to apply for the Ultimate Fighter. And do you have any other fighters? They're like, well, yeah, we got this nut job. He'd probably be good on the show, Chris Lieben. So we go down there and apply for the show and make it on. And it's so much stuff does not make the show. It's just incredible how much gets dropped. Now, everybody always asks, well, were the people actually like this? Were they portray it in a different light? You can't create footage.
Right.
You can edit footage to make it look a little differently. They did that with me one time where they asked, well, who's going to lose this fight? And I said, well, I think it's going to be Chris. And then they cut away. I said Chris Lieben. They cut to Chris Sanford. Or no, wait. I said Chris
Backwards,
Sanford.
yeah.
They cut to Chris Lieben. So they made it look like I was throwing Lieben under the bus when it wasn't the case. But other than little stuff like that, what we did and how we acted made it on the show. And I just wish there was so much more of it. And of course, all my stories from the show are from my perspective. But so we had the vote. Who was going to be the team captain? So we did these training times for a few days. Randy and Chuck Liddell were the two coaches, and they got together, and Liddell told Randy, and this I heard this from Lieben, that if you don't want to lose your guys, Nate and Lieben, you better pick them first. Otherwise, he was going to. Because Lieben asked Chuck, he's like, hey, why didn't you pick me? I would have thought you would have picked me. We're the same type of personality, all this and that.
Right.
And that's when Chuck told him that he wanted to give Randy the respect of picking his own teammates. So, what was it? Chuck got the first pick. He picked Bobby Southworth, and Randy had his pick, and he picked me. So we get our whole teams picked out, go back to the house. It's the middle of the afternoon, and everybody's already hammered. Lieben's drunk. Stefan Bonner's hammered. But we decide, all 8 of us get together, well, who's got to be the team captain? Who's going to be kind of the driving force? And I'm looking at the crowd of my teammates going, oh, God, don't let it be me. I do not want to be a representative for these idiots. I'm going to vote for Alex Karalexis. He seemed to be the best temperament. First person asked, Alex Karalexis says, well, I think Nate should be captain. He was picked first by Randy. And I was like, oh, fine. Well, Stefan Bonner completely disagrees, because he's the biggest guy. He's fought some of the tougher fights, and he's the only guy for the whole season that I tapped to, because I didn't want him to break my arm. He has that personality. And when he and I would spar, even when it was with little gloves, the 4-ounce gloves, we were playing rock'em sock'em robots, because I'm not going to let anybody push me around like that. I don't deal well with bullies. And Stefan's not a bully, but when it comes to fighting, he is. He gets lost in the moment. So we had to be separated several times, because he would throw some shots at me, and I would just charge him down. And in 20 years of sparring, I've asked one person to slow down, and that was Brandon Vera. He was beating the crap out of me so badly, and not even intentionally, that I had to tell him, buddy, dude, you got to slow down, man. I can't even see how you're beating me. And he was like, oh, damn, brother, I'm sorry. He was just that good.
Yeah, he's another veteran, Air Force, if I'm not mistaken.
He was a guy that he came up and trained at Team Quest years before he made it to the UFC. And I remember sparring with him then. And I want to say I maybe got the better of him. He said after our round of sparring, he goes, damn, brother, you got some heavy hands. Like, yeah, you got some good movement, my man. I like it. And then fast forward to a few years, he has progressed light years beyond me. And it made me realize my time at Team Quest, while I had some phenomenal training partners, we did not have the skilled coaches that Brandon Vera was getting. And it really made me think, okay, it wasn't my best decision to leave Team Quest and find some better coaches. But that's a whole different story.
Right.
So whereas I know, so we're at this, trying to figure out who's going to be the captain for the team. And Stefan Bonner is just yelling. He's like, I'm the toughest. I should be the captain. And I just looked at him and I said, Stefan, I can't hear you when you yell that loudly. And he just completely deflated. And he just sat there and looked at me. So I go, if you guys want to calm down, if you want me to be team captain, I'll be team captain. But here's the deal. I'm going to give you everything I've got. 100% of who I am. I'm going to try and win this. But I want to win it because I'm the best person here. Not because I manipulated you guys behind the scene. That's what I promise you will get from me. And from now on out, that's the best that I could do to try and help my team be successful in any way, shape, or form.
You pulled the dad card on him, didn't you?
Well, I wasn't going to be able to beat them all up.
That's funny, though. You probably never saw it coming.
Yeah.
So, grappling or standing, which do you prefer? If I had to guess, I'd say you probably prefer standing.
I really love them both, because I came into this with absolutely nothing. Now, I love to hit things. There's nothing like knocking somebody out. It's just the best feeling, and I am the only human being that has knocked Chris Lieben unconscious.
Holy smokes.
He's been TKO'd a couple times, but I hit him just right one time. And we were light sparring, and I just threw a jab, cross hook, left hook, and I tipped him right on the tip of the chin. And he went out, asleep for 10 seconds. And I have a witness, John Hackelman, Chuck Liddell's coach was there, and he saw this, and he starts yelling at me for knocking him out. I'm like, Coach, it was an accident. I didn't mean to. But there's just something to it, and I didn't even feel it. There's something about hitting somebody and knocking them out. It's just the most beautiful feeling. and you know, throwing elbows, I love to strike. It's like therapy for me to hit things. But jiu-jitsu is so beautiful and so smooth and so deep. Like Muay Thai is the art of 8 limbs, elbows, knees, legs, hands. But jiu-jitsu, you can't write an encyclopedia on it. And Muay Thai is so complex in its own right. But Muay Thai, I feel like you never stop learning with that. And now I feel like my Muay Thai fans are going to hate me for saying this too, because Muay Thai is the same way. I'm not degrading that at all. I wish I was better at Muay Thai, and I wish I was better at jiu-jitsu. I'm so injured right now, and I've got another back surgery coming up. I've got degenerative disc disease, so I've got 2 more discs that have collapsed in my lower back.
What level?
L5S1 and L3-4.
That's the most common. It sucks.
I've got L2-3 fused and L4-5 fused right now.
Holy smokes.
So my goal, once I have my surgery, and it'll probably be in December, go through my recovery, and then get back in shape and get back on the mat and be there for my teammates and start getting back into jiu-jitsu, because I really miss it and I love it. And when I was in Japan, I was racked with pain after every practice with you guys. And that was literally the first time I had rolled in probably a year, because my back is so bad. But I wasn't going to miss the opportunity to roll with you guys.
We should have said something, man. We could have at least got you some motion or something.
It takes more than that, brother.
No, yeah, I understand, but I mean, at least, get some anti-inflammatories going. But
I went to a pain doctor a couple months ago because they've changed the federal guidelines on what kind of narcotics you can get from your primary care physician. And the pain doctor, who was a quack to be sure, but he just looked at me and goes, "The amount of medication you're on will kill you. It's just too much." I'm like, "Doc, I'm taking these medications so I can live my life.
Right.
I'm not taking them so I can sit at home on the couch." Okay? And just a few weeks ago, I had I've got a rental property. The city was after me. I had to redeck the back of the house. I had to carry 21, 22, 16-foot 2x6s from the front of the house up the hill to the back of the house, cut them, lay them, nail them. And that's my life. Today I was carrying, I'm working with a guy, helping him out. So I was carrying these boxes, 10, 20-pound boxes up and down a flight of stairs into my truck to get them back to the house, then unload the truck. And I'm a worker. I always have been. So it is what it is.
It's life. Life has to go on. I think a lot of people, I appreciate it. A lot of people look at guys like you, and all they see is, you guys are like, I don't want to say idols, because that might not be the right word, but, a lot of people look up to you guys, but they don't realize that, you're real people. You have lives as well. And
it's funny you say that, because I was on Chael's podcast a few times, and he hit me up a few months ago to be on his podcast, and I just said, "Chael, you don't want me on your podcast, because the things I'm going to say about you don't want other people to know." And he said, "Well, what is it?" And I said, "You remember when I asked you for help feeding my daughter? I needed a training partner, and you said you would do it, and then when it came time to do it, you backed out. You turned tail and ran, and you deserted me in my moment of need. That's the story I'm going to tell. You don't want that story out there." And he said, "No, I think it's time." So I went on his podcast, and the first time I was on his podcast for about an hour, and I just laid into him. I said, "You get out there, this big bravado, telling everybody you're this gangster. When it came down to it, when I needed help to feed my little girl, you tucked tail and ran away." And I just laid into him for the first hour. And at the end, and he just said, "You know what, you're right. I did. History will remember you better than me." And at the end of the podcast, I gave him a hug and I said, "Man, you have no idea how much respect you just gained in my eyes. You went from none to a phenomenal amount." Because most people, they are not going to broadcast their shameful things.
Of course not. Yeah, it's embarrassing for one.
And so he invited me back for more stories. And I said, "Chael, you know what? I've got it out of me. I'm good. Now let's tell the fun stories.
You know,
So the next 3 times, I just told ridiculous stories. And when he announced that he's now signed with Bellator, I hit him up again and I said, Chael, it's time. Let me interview you. So I interviewed him and asked him all these questions. And he had said the same thing, that all these crazy, ridiculous stories are entertainment for everybody else but us. Because when my ankle was broken on The Ultimate Fighter and my dream was dashed that I wasn't going to be able to get to fight for The Ultimate Fighter to become The Ultimate Fighter, they put a camera in front of me and said, what are you feeling right now? And I said, what the bleep do you think I'm feeling? This is my life.
right.
I'm trying to feed my daughter with this. This isn't a game for me. And I think it gets lost because people see the Kardashians or these people who are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're going shopping. And here I am on The Ultimate Fighter getting paid $500 a week, and then I couldn't fight for 6 months afterwards. So my entire time in The Ultimate Fighter, I made, I think, $3,600 or $6,000, I think it was.
Wow.
And then I had to give Team Quest 15% of that for their commission. And we're still living on $1,000 a month.
Right.
And it just brought me back to what Chael said, this is our life. And Chael just lost his newborn baby due to wisteria. And I just had to say, you mentioned it the other day, this isn't entertainment for us. This is how we feed our families. And I hope everyone out there remembers this. And it's funny, some people remember it very well. When Anderson Silva broke his leg fighting Chris Weidman, I tweeted out there, it looks like Anderson Silva threw another fight. Because when he lost to Weidman the first time, everybody was like, he threw this fight, what a joke. And
Right.
so I was making fun of them. So somebody just lashed out at me, how dare you say that, he's injured. I was like, really?
Totally lost, yeah.
You're talking to me about an injury. Do you realize they show me getting knocked out by Rich Franklin every UFC pay-per-view? If you don't laugh at these things, and I have the right to laugh at these things, you are just going to be the most bitter, angry person. Let
Sure.
it go. And it's funny because, so I immediately blocked that guy on Twitter like I always do with the haters, because I don't care. If you're that angry at life that you're going to lash out at a stranger you think you know, spend your time on somebody else, because I'm not going to give you the energy. I'm too busy trying to fulfill my own dreams still.
Right.
To let your highlight be getting a UFC fighter angry.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up I'm sorry, go ahead.
Let me finish this. So I immediately blocked the guy. Well, like 2-3 years later, he finds me on Facebook, sends me a message, and goes, I don't know if you remember me. You made a joke when Anderson Silva broke his leg, and I really overreacted, and I just wanted to apologize and say, hey, man, I'm sorry for what I said. And I was like, wow, you got to call the Guinness Book of World Records. Somebody online admitted wrongdoing, or at least perceived wrongdoing, and apologized. That is crazy.
That's definitely a first. Holy smokes. Yeah, it's funny you bring up the Chael podcast, because I listened to that one, the one that you were on there, and I was thinking, because I think I'd asked you maybe a week or two before that, before it was broadcast anyway, that if you would do the show with me. And I was thinking, oh man, I definitely have to listen to this so I know not to repeat some of the same questions or topics or whatever. But man, I didn't know about his daughter, and that really I took that to heart, because I have a daughter as well, and I just, my heart went out to him when I heard that.
Yeah, and I had just think I kind of heard around the way that his daughter was sick. And I sent him a text and I said, hey, brother, you just let me know if there's anything I can do for you. If we can bring some food over or take a spell at the hospital, whatever it is, that's what we're here for. Mm-hmm. And he said, I forget his exact words, but it was something like, she's over it now, she's at peace. And I read this and I was like, wait a minute. She's over it? She's over the illness? Everything's good? Or not? Right. And I just called him right there and I said, yo, man, you got to clarify this for me. And he said, no, she's gone. And it was just heartbreaking. When my daughter was born, I was scared to death in the first place, having a daughter I wasn't expecting. And then to have a girl, I was terrified for that in the first place. I would not let my daughter leave my sight. I wouldn't, even when they put her in the little glass cubicle.
Right.
I was there the whole time. I was like, nobody is taking my little girl. Nobody's hurting her. Nobody's transferring this. And I am that guy where the doctors, they need to be aware. if something happens, I got nothing else to live for. That's my motivation. So you better take very good care of her, or poor things may happen. You never know.
No, well, you probably don't know this about me, but I'm an emergency room nurse. So the ones that get me, I can deal with trauma. I can deal with the people that code, all that. None of that really bothers me too terribly much. But when the kids come in, that's the hardest to deal with than anything. It's just gut wrenching.
And you guys have such an incredibly hard job. I mean, I speak quite often at hospitals about my back surgeries that I've had, and I always say, when you see me fighting, I win the fight, they raise my hand. And in the background, you'll see 2 or 3 people quietly smiling. Nobody knows their names, nobody's interviewing them. Those are the ones that made it possible for me to succeed. And I always think about that, people like yourself. The doctor does incredible work, but without you all, without his cornerman, her cornerman, it would be nearly impossible for the doctor to do what they do. You guys are so incredibly important for the job, and the doctor generally gets all the credit, because that's the main face of it. The anesthesiologist, the nurse, those type of people, they're more in the shadows, kind of doing their job with quiet dignity. And I always want to make sure everybody knows, everybody there at the hospital staff, even the people that work to just make sure the instruments are clean.
Right.
If they're not doing their job right, people die.
That's true.
You guys have such incredibly important jobs, and I hope you all realize it. I mean, I was even at the pharmacy picking up some medications, and I told the pharmacist, I said, I hope you understand how important your job is, because people come in here, and as somebody suffering with chronic pain, that if I do not have my pain medications, I can't stand up. I would literally be on the floor crying. I'd be in so much pain, and I've had my face shattered and fought through it. I told the pharmacist, I said, I hope you understand what good work you're doing, that people need this. And
I'm cool with being in the background. I'm okay with that.
Good.
Yeah.
That's good.
But
Quiet dignity.
what's that?
Quiet dignity.
Sometimes, unless I'm drinking, and then all bets are off. But
That's good.
That's for a different story. But
Everything in moderation.
that's right.
Especially moderation.
So I want to get on to a more happier topic. So Jiu-Jitsu, you said you love it. Of course, I love it too. Do you prefer gi or no gi?
I prefer no gi because I am so bad at gi. It's embarrassing. And I have my purple belt, but I honestly feel like when I come through my next surgery and I start training, I want to go back at least to a blue, maybe back to a white belt, because I'm so bad with the grips. And I was given my purple belt verbally by, I was training with a black belt who I outweighed by 40 or 50 pounds. And we're doing no gi. And if I can tap you, it's with a triangle. And I caught him in a triangle. Well, everybody that I was with was really pissed off because we were in his gym in California. And they were like, you never tap out a black belt in his own gym. And I just looked at him and said, I'm an athlete. I don't care about your games. Maybe he will think in the future, oh, this young guy who outweighed me tapped me out because I was out of shape. Maybe that will motivate him to train harder and be in shape. Well, so the next time I saw this black belt, and Chris Howder, phenomenal guy, he catches me in a rear naked choke, and I catch him in another triangle. And again, man, I'm just a fan of Chris Howder's. He's such a great guy and such a great teacher and all that stuff. And then he looked at me and goes, the next time you compete in jiu-jitsu, wear a purple belt. And I said, Coach, I don't even have a gi anymore. And he goes, buy one and buy a purple belt.
He's old school.
Disrespect him by not wearing a purple belt.
Sure.
I just feel that my game is so bad. Hopefully he would allow me to be demoted, not be too offended. But And I know how he wouldn't be. To me, it's just more, I want to respect the game of jiu-jitsu more than anything and earn my chops on the mat, just like anybody should.
Yeah, he's old school jiu-jitsu for the States, for sure.
Oh, yeah, man. Him and Bob Bass. Is that the name? Bob Bass and Rick Bass. These guys back in the day, they were some of the first American black belts. And we had the opportunity to train with them. And it was like magic. We couldn't even comprehend what they were doing.
It's an awesome sport. I love it. I'm going to do it until I physically, literally can't move ever again.
See, I need to change up my game now, because now I'm 44, and I do have old man strength now. I don't have old man cardio, and I don't have old man. I do have old man joints, so things tear a lot easier, and I'm mostly scar tissue as is. So I need to switch to a more intelligent game, and not just the brutal, I'm going to take this because I'm stronger. And that's why I like no-gi jiu-jitsu, because I can still use my athleticism, and I can still roll fairly well with higher belts in no-gi, because I can slip around and move around, and I just don't have the knowledge as of yet for the gi jiu-jitsu to really be worthwhile. I'm
just the opposite. I have absolutely zero no-gi game at all. I suck. But I love the gi.
Nice. Yeah, that's what's so cool about it. That's what I love so much about fighting. It's so deep. You can do whatever you want to. I wish I had more judo. I love the game of judo. But you have judo, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, boxing, wrestling, all of these things that are all part of fighting. And I know a lot of women, they may not want to get on the mat and get sweaty with some guys in a no-gi class, but a gi class they'll love, or a kickboxing class. And it gives them confidence and some self-defense. And especially, that's something I think so many people forget. You do it for self-defense quite often, but the confidence that you learn from it, and it takes away, we walk around with this invisible barrier that we think we all have. And then when tragedy strikes, oftentimes it's so devastating for people, because now they realize this invisible barrier was never there all along. The emperor has no clothes. You have no invisible barrier. At any time, you can get struck by a car, hit by lightning, assaulted, raped, anything like that.
It's true.
Jiu-jitsu, I think, really prepares you for that. It takes away that, it makes you realize that we don't have that invisible barrier. That if somebody's in our face, we're still comfortable. We know what that world is all about. And then especially with jiu-jitsu and women for self-defense, it is just striking a woman who's 120 pounds and knocking out a 250-pound drunk guy. That's going to be really tough.
Right.
Slipping into a triangle or a rear naked choke, that's money all day long. It's one of the best ways for self-defense as far as I'm concerned.
I think if nothing else, it teaches you to be calm in the moment, not to freak out. Just staying in close and not being afraid to be that close to somebody. It's most people, they don't want you anywhere near them, arm's length, and that's it. But yeah, you're absolutely right, 100%. Hey, I wanted to, when you were here in Yokosuka, you brought up something pretty cool to a buddy of mine, Larry Kreiner, the guy that had the kimonos he was showing you. And you brought up your new thing that you're kind of into. It's probably not new anymore, but your zombie cage fighter.
Oh, yeah.
You want to talk about that a little bit?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, everybody had been bugging me to write a biography, but I didn't want to write the usual Rocky story. It's been done a million times. So I wrote about what I've been through, what I've seen and done as a fighter and as a single father, and then I threw in zombies.
Awesome. Who doesn't love zombies?
Oh, exactly. And I started off with I sat down at my old computer that would freeze randomly, so I'm just sitting here typing, and every once in a while I'd look up and the screen had completely frozen. I'd have to take a picture of it, restart my computer, keep typing, and I ended up with this 22-page treatment that told the whole story. And I thought it was pretty good. I sent it off to my agent. I wanted him to read it, I didn't hear back from him for a couple months on it. And finally he calls me and he goes, dude, and as my agent, Gary Ybarra of the AMR group, who's still one of my closest friends, and he says, man, I didn't want to read it because I didn't want to have to tell you it sucked. And I knew you'd get mad. But, dude, this is really good. I said, I know. It's my story plus zombies. He said, what do you want to do with it? And I said, everything. So since that time, I've been slowly making it into a comic book. I've got the first issue is kind of a one-shot that I did in 2012. Mm-hmm. It shows a snapshot into the world of what it is. And you can get it, everybody can get it at zombiecagefighter.com. Just download a free PDF of it. And then I've got all these other shirts that I've been so lucky to work with these amazing artists. And now we're working on telling the entire story through a 6-issue miniseries. And I've got issues 1 and 2 of that done. And issue 3 is almost done. And my artist is working on issues 4, 5, and 6. And get that story told and out there, and then just really see where it goes from there. Because I really think the story it's a good one. And I'm proud of it. And like I said, the artwork that I have, the artists that I've been able to work with, and I'll go do a comic book convention. I just did Rose City Comic Con here in Portland a couple weeks ago, and just sold a ridiculous amount of shirts and comic books. And my buddy Randy Bowen, who's the sculptor, he makes superhero sculptors. He's the best guy in the world. He did a zombie cage fighter sculpture for me. So those are going to be available soon. And yeah, it's really cool to see it come to life.
That's
and to
awesome.
have people come back and say, I enjoy this story, I want more.
Funny you said that. I just wrote the first time a short story. I'm a guy that, school, prior, coming up into high school and everything, school was not for me. So I was never a writer, never paid attention really. I was pretty lazy in high school. But I started, it all came from a dream, believe it or not. It's pretty corny. I'll have to send you a copy of it. But yeah, it ended up turning into a short story, and I got it published on Amazon. So
oh, cool.
Yeah, it's kind of neat. But so I definitely feel you on that whole comic book writing and seeing something that you produced, now out to the masses. That's pretty awesome. It's a good feeling.
Yeah, it really is. It's really rewarding.
I've got two questions I want to ask you, and one that you're probably tired of hearing about, but I'm gonna ask you anyway because I think I've steered away from all the other crap. The Kalib Starnes fight. How tired? First of all, how tired are you of talking about that fight?
Oh no, man! It's brand new stories to somebody who hasn't heard it before.
Well, that's true. But so, what was your take? I mean, so if you don't know the fight, the guy you fought, Kalib Starnes, seemed, ran around the ring the whole entire fight. He just basically ran from you.
Yeah, he really did. It was scored at the end of it. One judge gave it 30-24, so every round was a 10-8. And it was I think it tied with the highest scoring discrepancy. If that's the right word I want to use. Mm-hmm. But like with everything in my life, there's this ridiculous backstory. So I have my back surgery, and I come back through, and it's been, at the time, it was the worst thing imaginable. Now I actually work with the company as their spokesman, as I mentioned, and I help head up their patient support program, The Better Way Back, to help patients get the support that they need for this back surgery. Well, at the time, there wasn't anything like that, so I go through this essentially all by myself, come through on the other side and realize, oh my God, I can fight again. I can fulfill my dream. So I'm trying to figure out who I want my first fight to be with, and I called up Joe Silva, and he said, well, we want you to fight Pete Sell. And I went, oh my God, Pete Sell would be a really tough fight. I beat him before in a really quick knockdown. He's going to come out, guns blazing, try and put me away. He's been on the tear. He's got Matt Serra in his corner. I've been out for 22 months. I want Kalib Starnes. I think that'll be a good warm-up fight for me. So Joe Silva says, yeah, that sounds good. So he calls Kalib Starnes. Joe Silva calls me back and he goes, yeah, Kalib won't fight you. He says you're not worthy. You just lost your last fight, my title fight against Rich Franklin.
Right.
And he won his, a close decision against Chris Lieben. So he says, go win a fight and then he'll think about it.
Wow.
And I just said to myself, all right, I'll take the fight against Pete Sell. It's going to be a tough fight, but I'm going to win. And then I'm going to fight Kalib Starnes, and I'm going to end his career. And so I beat Pete Sell, and I called up Joe Silva, and I said, or Joe Silva called me and said, "You still want Kalib Starnes?" And I said, "Yep." And he said, "All right, we're going to make him fight you." So it's in Montreal, and Kalib Starnes, a Canadian. And so I just, all week long, I just had this vision that I'm going to walk out and everyone's going to boo me. And they're going to cheer for Kalib. Mm-hmm. But as the fight goes along, they're going to start cheering for me. I'm going to win over the entire foreign crowd because I will be the only real fighter in that ring. Because I watched tapes of Kalib, and he's a bully. He can only do well moving forward. Mm-hmm. If you put him on his back foot, moving away, he just collapses. So the whole game plan was just stay in his face and move forward the entire time. Never give him any momentum. And I just remember thinking, all right, I'm going to win over the crowd. And at the end of the fight, I'm going to give the Rocky IV speech. And so as the fight goes along, it appears he is literally running away from me. There was one time when I kicked him, he turned to run away and ran right into the cage.
Yeah.
And bounced off. And so in the third round, I did the running man to kind of mock him, to stand still and fight. Well, he flipped me off, so I grabbed him by the back of the head and kneed him one shot, and then he was off running again. So the 10-second bell goes off in the third round. And I just remember thinking to myself, all right, buddy, you've been running away this entire time. I'm going to give you 10 seconds to do whatever you want to me. Mm-hmm. And I had been in fights where it was Nate Marquardt and Ivan Solivari. Very boring fight. Solivari would not engage.
Right.
And it's very difficult to fight somebody if they don't want to.
Sure.
It's pretty tough to run somebody down. That cage is huge. And Nate Marquardt got upset, and the whole crowd got upset. Everybody was angry about this and left really upset. So I'm thinking to myself, I can't give you the fight that you guys want. But more than fights, you come here to make memories. I'll give you something you'll never forget. And I did what I call the rock hammer. I put or the retard punch, or whatever you want to call it. And I just threw these ridiculous punches, and he still ran away from me the whole time. At the end of the fight, when I was announced the winner, Kenny Florian said, "What do you think about fighting here in Canada?" And I said, when I first came out, y'all booed me, and I didn't really know what to think about that. But as the fight went along, y'all started cheering for me, so I figured if you can change and I can change, anybody can change. Straight out of Rocky IV.
It's awesome.
Everybody that knew Rocky IV, which was most of the crowd, just loved it, and everybody that didn't was like, "Oh my God, that's such a motivational thing." I had people telling me that. They're like, "I had no idea that was from a movie. I just thought, man, this guy's really on point. That's so motivational."
That's awesome. I love that story. So, I remember watching that fight, and I knew you had to be pissed, because I was pissed as a fan watching. I'm like, what's going on with this guy? It's ridiculous.
Well, I wasn't happy, but I also wasn't angry either, because I'm not one to, if somebody does something to hurt somebody, I'm the first guy, and I hate bullies. I hate people that are intentionally greedy or angry or that kind of stuff. But other than that, everybody has off days. It's just a matter of, it was in front of 1 million or 2 people, he had his off day. And I was a bad matchup for him, and he had pissed me off. So, not once did I ever speak disparagingly about Kalib. I never mocked him in any of the interviews or called him any names, because it is what it is. We get out there, we do the best we can, and he had an off night.
Right.
And he lost his job too. And well, that was my goal. Don't badmouth me. The worst thing you can do is make me angry. I'll rip my arm off and beat you with it.
Well, karma's a bitch. It'll catch up to you no matter what.
And karma, you don't have to do anything. And karma takes care of itself.
That's right. One last thing. Speaking of UFC, I don't know if you want to talk about it or not. If you don't, that's cool with me. The lawsuit that's going on, is that still going on, or is that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we're about 2 years in. We'll probably be another 2 or 3 years. Over the years, the UFC wanted to build this business, and how they did it, we believe, was kind of shady and against the actual antitrust laws that are put in place in America to protect consumers and to protect employees from what they do. They were able to buy the UFC by actually voting it down, making it illegal in Nevada, and then after they diminished the value, then they bought it. Then they were able to get the laws changed, and then they went through and bought up all the competition: WFA, WEC, Pride, Strikeforce, Elite FC, Affliction. They either were directly responsible for its closing, or they were, by buying them, or they had a helping hand in shutting them down. So as things have gone that way, they've used their monopoly, their exclusive contracts that never end unless the UFC wants them to. If you win a championship belt, your contract does not end. It continues on. And even if you decide you do not want to fight for the UFC again, if you fight out your contract, they have 3 months in the contract where you can only negotiate with them. Then they have a right to match it, and that's on an old contract. It could be even longer. Then they have a right to match for another year on top of that. So if for whatever reason you do not want to fight for the UFC, you want to go anywhere else and fight, you have to sit out nearly a year and a half of what could be your prime time to feed your family and pursue your sport.
Sure.
Just because you don't want to fight for the UFC. You lose a year and a half, essentially, of your career. Then you have the threats and the intimidation of things that they would do. John Fitch didn't want to sign away his likeness rights, so they cut him. At the time, they bought up pretty much all the competition. Then they threatened all of AKA, American Kickboxing Academy, because of what Fitch did. We're going to cut all of you guys as well. And it took some serious reworking to get Fitch back in the UFC, but ever since then, they just treated Fitch poorly, and that shows with the fighters have no rights, even with the new drug testing that they do.
Oh, yeah.
And everybody wants every sport cleaned up. That's just common sense. But at your job, do you have to report your whereabouts 24 hours a day?
Right.
Where does it end? And if you don't tell them where you're at, if you don't do this 3 times in a year, you are suspended for 2 years. So you go to grandma's house, you go to Thailand for training, you forget to call the UFC, your phone dies, anything like that. They find out about it, you get a strike on your record. And the letter they send out is so condescending. They treat the fighters like children. And it's just so amazing to me that without the fighters, this sport would not exist.
That's true.
Yeah. Zuffa put in a lot of money, and they made a lot of money. They just sold it for $4 billion. And the fighters now are looking at this going, wait a minute, you've been telling us this whole time you're broke.
Right.
You can't afford to pay us. And they pay less now than they ever have before. If you take the median range of what the fighters are making, Lorenzo Fertitta said, the average fighter in UFC, the mid-range fighter makes $200,000 a year. That is straight up BS. That's a lie. Go ahead, show us the book. Show us your average guy in the UFC making that much money. No. Not when I think the starting wage now may be $8,000 or $10,000. And these are guys that are the best in the world. Compare that to the NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball.
Right.
Even in boxing, where the boxers will generally bring home 85% of the gross that they bring in. Whereas in MMA, for the UFC, the fighters get 15%. Another 15% goes to the production of the show. 70% of the gross is all profit, and it goes to the owners.
Well, then on top of the whole Reebok deal, now the fighters can't even have their sponsors. They can't make...
Can't have sponsors, and in my last fight, I made roughly $45,000 in sponsorships. These are companies that my agent went to, and they said, yes, we want to associate our name brand with Nate Quarry. Well, now, according to the Reebok deal, I would have been worth $5,000.
Holy smokes.
And 90% pay cut. And Dana White's response is, this is what's best for the sport. The athletes don't want to deal with sponsors. You're welcome.
Huh.
And I'm sitting here going, really, show me the fighter that says, thank you for me not having to collect $50,000 or $100,000 or an unlimited amount of money because I can work with whatever sponsor I want, as I was promised when I signed up with the UFC. So we're just taking our time. We're going to win this lawsuit. We're going to restructure things to where now the fighters can be actual independent contractors, not how they're told by the UFC. Yeah, you guys are independent contractors, so we don't have to pay any taxes or retirement or anything like that. You know, we just tell you when to work, where to work, who to work with, what uniform to wear, and where you are at all times. You have to tell us, and we can drug test you at any time.
Well,
Like independent contractors.
that sounds almost like the military. Wait a minute, what? Never mind, forget I said that.
Well, and the funny thing is, and I was talking to somebody else who was saying, well, the drug testing is a good idea. Sure it is. But where does it end? How much of it is a good deal? Can they show up 24 hours a day and draw blood from the vein? Does that make sense? What about aspirin? Can we take aspirin? You see guys that are taking over-the-counter supplements that then get suspended for 2 years because they've changed the rules about what you can and can't take, but then leave it on the athlete to figure out what it is through this ridiculousness of the way that they run this organization.
Right.
Or you look at Nick Diaz, who was suspended there for a while for 5 years. He tested, he did a drug test, he passed it, took a second drug test, more like hours apart, failed it for marijuana, took a third drug test, hours after that, passed it again. Nevada State Athletic Commission went off the second drug test, not the first and third, which I think was USADA or WADA, and it was just flat out insane.
Yeah, because everybody knows pot's a performance-enhancing drug. I'm kidding.
Ridiculous. And where does it end? Because Nick Diaz has a medical marijuana card from his home state of California.
Right.
So, and I'm such a huge believer in the first place. Who am I to tell you what you can and cannot put into your body? Why is that my responsibility to save you from yourself? You can't smoke weed, but go ahead and drink yourself to death.
Exactly.
How does that make sense? You know, just do your job. We have all these things that, you know, people say, well, you know, drug use leads to crime and robberies. Well, isn't that illegal already?
Yeah, right.
Is this pre-crime? Hey, I see you doing drugs. You may rob your grandparents at some point, so I'm going to lock you up to save you from your grandparents. Try doing that at a bar. Hey, everyone in here could drive home drunk, so I'm just going to arrest you all right now and throw you in jail to save that family from being killed because you could be a drunk driver. What? You like drunk drivers? Is that what it's... Oh, let me show you some pictures of a little girl who got killed by a drunk driver. Oh, that's what you're in favor of.
Right.
It sounds so ridiculous when you compare it to alcohol, and yet when it comes to drug use, everybody just gets in line because of the past.
I talked to, in fact, I had on a podcast just a couple of days ago, a good friend of mine, he's an emergency room physician. And, you know, I straight up asked him, I said, how many cases have you ever seen somebody comes in either completely wrecked, whatever case, accidents, whatever, from marijuana only? And his responses in his 5 years as being an ER doc, 0. You know, now if it's mixed with something else, all bets are off. But you know, but yeah, I'm with you on that. I agree. You know, do what you want, and where the studies at, there's less damaging. I mean, if it's got amazing pain relieving properties, it's got amazing nausea relieving properties. Why aren't we using it more? You know. But,
yeah, and the DEA just came out and said once again, marijuana has no medical benefits, and it's a Schedule I drug. And you have to look at these things and say, wait a minute, is this the country that was founded here a couple hundred years ago?
right.
Because I seem to recall it was actually a law that if you owned land, you were required to grow hemp. And then you look at down the years how these things happened. Why was opium banned? Because they were trying to control the Chinese immigrants. Why was marijuana banned? Because Nixon was trying to control the hippies and the Black Panthers.
That's for sure.
These are facts. These are things that happen, but you have so many people that are just willing to believe whatever they're told. And I sit here and I watch this and I see this propaganda on both sides, on the far left and on the far right. And it amazes me because I'm an independent. I just want things to make sense.
Right.
And all I get from the left and from the right is, well, you should agree with me 100%. Well, I don't. I agree with you when you're right. And here's why I think you're wrong. Well, it doesn't matter. You go against our party and you can't get... And so you have these incredible divisions. So you have a political landscape like what we have right now, where most people, when you sit down with them, they don't care if two gay men want to get married.
Right.
What difference does it make? And even if it's your religion, when did we decide that your religion decides how people can live their lives? Oh, you don't like smoking weed? Okay, but you'll drink yourself into oblivion.
Right.
So why is your vice okay and this guy's isn't? And to be clear, I've had plenty of people die of drug use in my life. But I've also seen my brother with liver failure due to alcoholism.
Sure.
Why is one okay and the other isn't? These types of things don't make any sense, and I feel like we as people really need to start paying attention and take back the power. You've got to watch Going Clear, the documentary on HBO about Scientology. It's really fascinating. It was very familiar to me because of being raised a Jehovah's Witness. You have this cult who was made up by Ron L. Hubbard, I think his name is, who was a science fiction writer, decides he's going to make money by creating this religion. So he's battling the IRS to get tax-exempt status for his pseudo-religion. I think he even passed away before it happened. So the new person in charge of Scientology then is battling the IRS. Scientology, which has very few members, bullies the IRS to get them into their tax-exempt religious status. The IRS is the most insane, controlling thing that the government has to throw at us besides a tank.
Right.
And they were brought down by a cult with a few thousand members. And I look at this and I go, my God, if you people actually understood the power that you have, you would bring the nation to its knees and rebuild it in the vision that the Founding Fathers had in the first place, where it is freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to live your life the way that you choose to, as opposed to somebody on the other side of the country in a room being bribed, not lobbied, bribed.
Yeah, free your mind. That's what I say.
Perfect you. Exactly.
Free your mind. You know, it's funny you bring up Scientology. I was in New York City for Fleet Week a couple years back, and on a whim, a buddy of mine that I was with, he's a crazy bastard to begin with. He's like, dude, they're out in the corner, like, hey guys, come on, just come in and see what it's all about. And so he's like, yeah, come on, let's try it. You know, they got like free drinks and stuff, so popcorn and everything, whatever. I'm like, all right, whatever. And I felt I'd never felt so uncomfortable in my life. It's exactly what you said. It's a cult, and they had these. They had to sit down in this room and watch this movie, and they had like sounds all the way around. You could tell there's like subliminal messaging in it, and it was the weirdest thing I've ever been a part of. And then we left and got drunk, and everything was fine. So,
well, it just amazes me. It just really shows how empty so many people are. They have no direction. They have no purpose. They have no belonging. So the first thing that they see, the first group that pays any attention to them, that's where they're going to go. That's their new calling. My mother was that way. She didn't have a happy upbringing. My father didn't have a happy upbringing. Well, when they got introduced to Jehovah's Witnesses and this promise of living forever on a paradise on earth with lions and tigers and gorillas who are now your friends, and you never die and you're perfect, and I'm sitting here now as a grown adult looking back at this just going, that's just insanity. That if I ran up to you and I said, hey man, I just saw a guy walk on water, you'd be like, dude, how high are you?
Right.
No, I swear I saw it. You wouldn't believe me at all. But if I said, hey, I've got this book that's 2,000 years old, talks about this guy walking on water. Really? Oh, well, can I give you 10% of my income every single month? That sounds awesome.
Right.
And so many people, they get great things out of religion because if you look at the right message about loving and acceptance, and it gives them hope. But they have to have faith. And faith, the literal definition is believing in something with zero evidence.
Right.
And we don't have faith in anything else. You don't have faith in a plumber, in a painter, in a spouse. You know, you don't meet somebody and go, I know we just met, but I have faith that you'll be the perfect person for me. No, you get to know them. You hang out. You make sure you want to get your car painted. You look at the other work that this painter has done. Faith only works in religion, and it's just, I see it. It does help so many people get through some tough times. I just always invite them to just figure out what it is you believe, why you believe it, In my case, it's torn apart my family because we chose not to believe it, and so it just separated everything. It's really a sad case in so many ways because religion is very much us versus them. We are the correct ones.
Right.
We are the chosen ones. Everyone else is going to die, and that's the theme through the Bible, especially the first half for it.
Sure.
I don't mean to offend the religious people out there because I have very many good religious friends, and Gandhi had a saying, I love Christ but not Christians because they do not live as Christ did. And I have some friends that I just want to say, hey Gandhi, you got to meet my buddies over here, because they really follow the true, the loving and kindness that I feel the message that Jesus was trying to get across throughout so much of the Bible. So it really can bring some peace to some people and good direction. I always worry about the judgment that can come along with it, and the us versus them as well, for whatever religion it may be.
Sure. No, I'm with you on that. I've done a lot of soul searching over the years on that, but that's a whole nother topic. We could talk for hours on that.
Oh, yeah.
But do you realize it's been an hour and a half? I don't know if you realize that or not.
And I got to get some food in me.
Yeah, I got to get to sleep. I got to go to work tonight. But hey, listen, I appreciate it. One last story I want to bring up because I think it's the coolest thing ever, and I saved it for last on purpose. Your fight that you did with that mentally challenged guy.
Yeah, his name's Jacob Beckman. He's got Down syndrome, and it was, I guess, a little over a year ago now, maybe a year and a half. There was some chatter online about this young man, 19 years old. He'd been training in MMA for a few years, and he wanted to have an MMA fight, and because he has Down syndrome, everyone just said, no, sorry, this isn't for you. And I don't do very well with people telling people what they can and can't do and putting them in a little box. So I reached out and I said, why not? I'll be that guy. And it seemed to me like I was the perfect person for this task because I don't have an ego, and I wanted him to be the star of the show. It wasn't about me in any way, shape, or form.
Sure.
I met with his mother, I met with Jacob, I met with his coach, and I said, what is it you want from me? What can we do to help fulfill this dream? Trained with Jacob a few times so I could feel his energy, really put his mother's fear to ease, let her know that my biggest concern, number one concern, is Jacob's safety. Way down there, way far down number 2 was my safety.
Right.
So I got Jacob there, and they wouldn't let his mother go down into the basement where it was funny, we had our bout in the Roseland Theater where Chael Sonnen has his show, Full Contact Fighting Federation. And that's where I fought 20 years ago, say 18 years ago or so. So it was a nice finale to my career. And I brought him up there into the cage, and I said, buddy, everybody is here for you. But when you come out into this cage, you own this. You run around, you blow kisses. He crawled into the stage, and into the cage, John Jones style, ran around and came out the first round and throwing bombs and got the takedown, almost finished me with an ankle lock. And second round, he came out throwing even harder and was able to shoot the takedown and catch me in the ankle lock and tap me. And for me to be able to just be a part of helping a young man fulfill his dream, my whole thought was, well, why wouldn't I do that? If I have the power to help somebody, why wouldn't I help them?
Right.
Isn't that how we want to be remembered? And I see these people all the time that it just seems like it's never enough for them. Whether it's possessions or dollar signs or whatever it may be, their soul seems to have this bottomless pit. And I feel through, I can sit down and I can write out a list of things that I feel I've overcome. And I can match it side by side of every single time I've been luckier than I deserve to be. And I felt this is just how it should be. I'm so lucky to be where I'm at right now, that why wouldn't I want to give back and help a young man fulfill his dream after I've been given so much?
That's amazing. I mean, that's just like one of the coolest stories ever. And I really applaud you for it. And I know that it wasn't, like you said, it wasn't about you. And that's the coolest part about it. But listen, brother, I'm so glad you came on the show. I owe you big time. My mom and dad are going to love the show.
Good.
But if you need anything from Japan, if you need anything from our way, just let us know. And we're more than happy to get it out to you.
Oh, will do. Just keep doing what you guys are doing. Yeah, stay safe and be good.
You've been listening to Nothing's Off the Table, the podcast where no subject is too taboo to discuss. Find us on iTunes, Facebook, and on Instagram. Nothing's Off the Table is a MadSiss Productions podcast.